The morning sun cast long, golden shadows across the tarmac at Denver International Airport. It was a crisp, clear day, the kind of weather pilots loved. Rachel Morgan walked around her aircraft, a sleek white Cessna Citation business jet. She was 35 years old and moved with a calm, practiced efficiency. She checked the tires, inspected the wings, and looked into the engines. To anyone watching, she was just another corporate pilot doing her job. Rachel worked for a company called Executive Air Services. Her job was to fly wealthy business executives to meetings across the country. It was a good job. It was safe, comfortable, and steady. But for Rachel, the best part of the job was that it was anonymous. No one here knew who she really was. No one asked about her past. She was just Captain Morgan, the quiet woman who always got her passengers to their destination on time. Inside the private terminal, her passengers were drinking coffee and checking their emails. They were 3 businessmen heading to Seattle for a meeting. They barely looked up when Rachel walked in. They saw her uniform and her pilot stripes, and they assumed she was just a normal pilot who had gone to flight school and worked her way up. That was exactly what Rachel wanted them to think. Her co-pilot for the day was Jason Webb. He was 28 years old, cheerful, and eager to please. He liked flying with Rachel because she was always calm. Nothing ever seemed to rattle her. He had asked her once where she learned to fly, and she had given him a vague answer about learning in California. Jason believed her. He had no reason not to. The passengers boarded the plane and settled into the soft leather seats. Rachel went into the cockpit and began her pre-flight checks. Her hands moved over buttons and switches with muscle memory. She started the engines, and they hummed to life. She spoke to the passengers over the intercom, her voice smooth and professional. Rachel taxied the jet to the runway. The tower gave them clearance for takeoff. She pushed the throttles forward, and the plane surged down the runway. It lifted off smoothly, climbing into the blue Colorado sky. It was a perfect takeoff. Rachel leveled the plane off at 37,000 feet and turned on the autopilot. For a while, everything was peaceful. The Rocky Mountains stretched out below them, covered in snow. The weather reports showed clear skies all the way to Seattle. Jason was looking at flight maps, and the passengers in the back were typing on their laptops. It was a routine morning. It was a quiet, normal life Rachel had built for herself over the last 6 years. But that peace was about to be broken. Suddenly, the radio crackled with a voice from air traffic control. It was Denver Center. The controller's voice sounded tight and nervous. He announced an emergency broadcast to all aircraft in the area. An unidentified plane had entered restricted military airspace. It was not talking to air traffic control. It was flying erratically, swerving back and forth. Rachel listened. Her face remained calm, but her eyes sharpened behind her sunglasses. Her mind instantly shifted gears. She was not thinking like a corporate pilot anymore. She was thinking like a soldier. The controller continued to give updates. The unknown plane was a small twin-engine aircraft. It was flying toward populated areas. The military had scrambled fighter jets to intercept it. Rachel heard a new voice on the radio. It was sharp, clear, and authoritative. It was a military pilot. "This is Raptor 11. The voice said, "We are supersonic and closing on the target." Rachel felt her heart skip a beat. Raptor. That was the call sign for the F-22 Raptor. It was the most advanced fighter jet in the world. It was a ghost in the sky, a machine built for total air dominance. It was also the plane Rachel used to fly. Raptor 11 reported that he could see the target. It was a Beechcraft Baron, a small private plane. It looked damaged. The tail was broken, and it was flying dangerously. The F-22 pilot said he was trying to signal the pilot of the Beechcraft, but there was no response. Rachel listened intently. She could hear the tension in the young military pilot's voice. She visualized the scene in her head. She knew exactly what the F-22 pilot was seeing on his screens. She knew the speed, the angles, and the danger. The situation got worse. Raptor 11 reported that the pilot of the small plane looked unconscious. He was slumped over controls. The plane was flying on a broken autopilot system, and it was heading straight for downtown Denver. The air traffic controller sounded desperate. He was trying to clear the airspace, moving other planes out of the way. But there was nothing he could do to stop the crashing plane. Then, the military command asked Denver Center for a list of all civilian planes in the area. The controller started reading off flight numbers and pilot names. When he got to Rachel's plane, he read her information. Cessna citation. Pilot, Captain Rachel Morgan. There was a long silence on the radio. Then, a second military voice came on. This was the wingman, Raptor 1-2. His voice sounded shocked. Denver Center. Raptor 1-2 requesting confirmation. The pilot asked, "Did you say Rachel Morgan is flying that citation?" The controller confirmed it. There was another pause. Then Raptor 1-2 spoke again, his voice filled with disbelief. "Center, be advised. If that is the Rachel Morgan, I think it is, you have Eagle 1 in your airspace. I repeat, Eagle 1 is flying a corporate jet at 37,000 feet. Rachel gripped the controls. She stared straight ahead. She felt her secret life crumbling away. Eagle 1, that was her old call sign. In the world of fighter pilots, that name was a legend. It belonged to a pilot who had flown impossible missions, a pilot who was considered one of the best to ever sit in a cockpit. Jason, her co-pilot, looked at her with wide eyes. Eagle 1? What are they talking about? The military pilots were talking over each other now. They sounded like excited fans. That is Eagle 1, the Raptor pilot said. The one who flew the Crimson Tide missions? I thought she vanished. Rachel knew she could not stay silent. People were in danger. The young pilots in the F-22s were distracted by her presence when they needed to be focused on saving the city. She pressed a button on her microphone. Her voice changed. It was no longer the polite voice of a corporate pilot. It was a commanding voice of a squadron leader. "Raptor Flight, this is Eagle 1 Actual," she said firmly. "Stand down the hero worship and focus on your mission. You have an uncontrolled aircraft heading towards city. Stop talking about history and do your job." The radio went silent for a second. The change in her tone was undeniable. She demanded respect, and she got it instantly. "Eagle 1, Raptor 1-1 copies," the military pilot said, his voice snapping back to professional attention. "Situation is critical. The pilot is out. The plane will hit downtown Denver in 7 minutes. We have permission to shoot it down to save the city, but we are looking for other options." Rachel's mind worked fast. She analyzed the speed and the wind. She knew the capabilities of the F-22 better than almost anyone. She came up with a plan. It was risky, but it was the only way to save the pilot in the Beechcraft and the people on the ground. She told the Raptor pilots to use a special maneuver. She wanted them to use the thrust from their massive engines to create a pressure wave. If they flew in a specific formation, the air coming off their jets could physically push the small plane off its course. It was like using the wind to steer a boat. The Raptor pilot hesitated. "Eagle 1, that maneuver is theoretical. Our computers say there is a low chance of success. It is dangerous." Rachel did not blink. "Raptor, I have used this technique in operations you do not know about. It works if you have the skill. I will talk you through it. Do exactly what I say. No improvisation." "Understood," the pilot said. Rachel began to give commands. She guided them like a conductor leading an orchestra. She told Raptor 1-1 exactly where to fly, how high, how fast, and how close to the damaged plane. She told Raptor 1-2 to take position on the other side. "Raptor 1, on my mark, reduce power to 78% and pull the nose up 3 degrees, Rachel ordered. "Raptor 2, you mirror him 5 seconds later." The pilots followed her instructions perfectly. They trusted her. Even though they had never met her, the legend of Eagle 1 was enough. Rachel gave the mark. The F-22s executed the move. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, the sensors showed the small Beechcraft starting to turn. The invisible wave of air created by the fighters was pushing it. It was working. The plane was turning away from the city. Rachel was not done. She guided them through another set of moves. She used her jets to push the small plane further, aiming it toward a large, empty field of grass outside the city limits. She was essentially flying the broken plane by remote control, using the fighter jets as her hands. The Beechcraft descended. It hit the grassy field. It bounced and skidded, kicking up dirt, but it stayed in one piece. Emergency trucks were already racing toward it. Raptor 1-1 came back on the radio. His voice was full of awe. Eagle 1, target is down in the safe zone. Rescue crews are moving in. That was the most incredible flying I have ever seen. How did you know that would work? Rachel let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Because I've had to do it before, she said quietly, "Good work, Raptor flight." Jason was staring at her with his mouth open. The passengers in the back were silent. They had heard everything over the cabin speakers. The controller at Denver Center spoke up. "Captain Morgan, was that really you? Are you former military?" Rachel sighed. She knew the secret was out. Affirmative, Denver Center. Requesting clearance to continue to Seattle. Raptor 1-1 interrupted. All stations be advised. Captain Rachel Morgan is former Air Force. Call sign Eagle 1. She is one of the original Raptor pilots. She is a legend. Finding out she is flying a corporate jet is like finding out a Formula One champion is driving a taxi. The radio channels exploded with chatter. Other pilots, controllers, everyone was talking about it. Rachel ignored them. She got her clearance and flew the rest of the way to Seattle in silence. When they finally landed, Jason turned to her. "You flew F-22s, he said. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rachel looked at the instrument panel. "Because I left that world, Jason. The only way to leave was to become someone else." Rachel hoped the story would stay quiet, but she was wrong. By the time she landed back in Denver that evening, the news had spread. 2 black government SUVs were waiting for her on the tarmac. A colonel in a blue Air Force uniform got out of the car. He looked at Rachel with respect. "Major Morgan," he said, using her old military rank. "We need to talk." Rachel stood tall. "Sir, I left the service 6 years ago. What I did today was an emergency response. It does not mean I am coming back." The colonel nodded. "I understand. But what you did today was a tactical breakthrough. The Air Force wants you back. We want you to teach at the weapons school. We want you to teach our pilots how to do what you just did." Rachel felt a pull in her heart. She missed the military. She missed the precision and the purpose. But she also remembered the stress and the pressure that had made her leave. "Sir, I am honored, but the answer is no," she said. Another officer, a woman named Colonel Brennan, stepped forward. "Major Morgan, those were my pilots you helped today. You saved them from having to shoot down a civilian. If you won't join the military again, would you consider working as a civilian contractor? You could come in, teach a class, and then leave. You keep your civilian life, but you share your knowledge." Before Rachel could answer, her phone rang. It was her boss at Executive Air Services. The call was short. They were putting her on leave. The company was worried about the publicity and the legal issues of having a rogue military pilot flying their clients. Rachel hung up the phone. She looked at Colonel Brennan. "It looks like my civilian career just ended," she said. Brennan smiled sadly. "Take the contractor job, Rachel. Just try it. 1 class. Then you can decide." Rachel agreed. In the weeks that followed, Rachel's face was on the news. People called her a hero. Old friends from the military reached out. Rachel tried to stay private, but she focused on preparing her course for the Air Force. When she returned to the base to teach, she felt a spark she hadn't felt in years. The young pilots looked at her with wide eyes. They were hungry to learn. Rachel taught them things about the F-22 that weren't in the manuals. She taught them how to think, how to react, and how to use a jet as an extension of their own bodies. Colonel Brennan watched her teach. After a few weeks, she spoke to Rachel. "You know," Brennan said, "you don't have to choose. You don't have to be just Eagle 1 or just a corporate pilot. You can be both." Rachel realized Brennan was right. She had spent so much time running away from her past that she had denied a huge part of herself. Rachel finished the course. It was a massive success. She agreed to come back every few months to teach, but she also needed to fly. She didn't want to go back to the boring world of corporate jets. She wanted something real. She moved to Alaska. She took a job flying a cargo plane, a rugged Cessna Caravan. It was hard work. She flew supplies to remote villages in snowstorms and bad weather. She landed on frozen lakes and gravel strips. The people in the villages didn't care about her military medals. They just cared that she brought them food and medicine when no one else could. Years went by. The legend of Eagle One grew. Young pilots in the Air Force told stories about her. They studied her moves. They watched videos of her teaching. She became a myth, a ghost who appeared to teach them, and then vanished back into the wild. But the most powerful part of her story wasn't her combat kills. It was the fact that she had walked away. It was the fact that she was humble. Rachel loved her life in Alaska. She loved the challenge of bush flying. It required skill and instinct, just like flying a fighter jet. One winter day, 3 years later, a distress call came over the radio. A medical helicopter had been forced to land on a frozen lake during a blizzard. A hunter on board was critically injured and needed a hospital immediately. Rachel heard the call. She knew the weather was too bad for most pilots, but she calculated the risk. She knew her plane. She knew the ice. She turned her cargo plane around. She flew through the blinding snow. Using every ounce of her skill, she landed on the ice, sliding to a halt near the helicopter. She helped load the injured hunter into her plane. She took off again, barely clearing the trees at the end of the lake. She flew him to the hospital in Fairbanks, saving his life. The local news picked up the story. They mentioned her military background. But to the people in Alaska, she was just Rachel. Jason, her old co-pilot, called her sometimes. "You sound happy," he told her one day. "You sound like you finally figured out who you are." Rachel smiled. She was sitting in her plane, watching the northern lights dance over the mountains. She realized she didn't have to hide anymore. She was Eagle One, the teacher of aces. She was Rachel Morgan, the bush pilot who saved lives in the snow. She was both. The day the F-22s unmasked her had felt like a disaster. She thought her life was over. But looking back, it was the best thing that could have happened. It forced her to stop hiding. It forced her to accept her whole self. She pushed the throttle forward, and her plane lifted into the cold air. She was free, and that, in the end, was the most legendary thing about her.